Hello students, welcome to Aspire Academy. I am Ridip Sharma Kaushik and your biology faculty for this session. Now, as we have already discussed a lot of stuff in our 11th standard, now your class 12 book of biology, which is the follow-up of the unit 5. And now this book started with the first unit, which is termed as unit 6, because it is connected to your previous units. That means we already talked about different forms of human physiology, plant physiology, and their body structures, how overall their body growth and functions to live, or to identify as a living organism. All those stuffs are kind of associated with your class 11 standard book. Okay, but now in your class 12 we have to focus on more the advanced level of human body structures and anatomy and all that stuff, not only in case of animals but also in case of plants also. So in this section, or for example in this unit of class 12, which is started from unit 6, which include the key chapter here, that means the reproduction. And reproduction, we already talked about this. The reproduction is one of the characteristics of living things, right? Not only in case of plants but also in case of small organisms, starting from amoeba or microorganisms to the largest organisms. Okay, or in case of human beings, the reproduction is very complex structure. Okay, the process of reproduction is very dynamic. At the same time, as time moves on, our understanding of the reproductive health and reproductive structures and different forms of reproduction that are emerging nowadays, or the related medical study that are associated with infertility or sexual health, all this stuff kind of sum up to this unit only. Okay, so reproduction as a whole, we are going to study about the reproduction, common reproduction in organism. That means overall, what are the organisms that we see in our environment, all some way reproduce. Okay, there are different forms of reproduction available for them, so they kind of reproduce by different means. So in the chapter 1, we only going to focus on the reproduction in organisms, where we are going to study about the overall aspect and what are the types of reproductions that are available, and also at the same time our understanding of the whole reproductive structure as a whole. Okay, what are the forms and what are the way to reproduce, and what do we actually mean by reproduction? These are the things going to be covered under this section. Now in your chapter 2, we are going to talk about the reproduction or sexual reproduction in case of flowering plants. So as we already covered in the anatomy and physiology part of plant, their body structures, how they are different forms of plant that exist in our environment. Now we are going to study about the reproduction in flowering plants. Okay, we only going to focus on how plants reproduced, what are the key cellular structure that are involved in this, and how different plants different plants follow different means to achieve their reproduction as a whole. So we are going to study about that in this section only. Okay, so in continuing that, in the chapter 3 we are going to talk about human reproduction, because obviously we are studying biology, and one of the key focus of biology is to study humans in more diverse and diverse way, because study of human anatomy and its different forms is very crucial to our understanding. Okay, because medical study completely deals with this section only. So our main focus will be on human reproduction, where we are going to talk about male and female reproductive structures, male and female reproductive organs, how they function, and what are the key hormones also related to that, because in class 11 we already talked about different forms of hormones in your human physiology section. Okay, we talked about different kinds of hormones that are responsible for human growth and development, because those hormones are kind of associated with human reproduction also, because this is one of the key, not a prime character, but it's one of the key factor. Because of that, we are kind of lived almost thousands of years, because humans reproductions is very advanced form, and also the newborn baby take lots of care and nourishment from their parental people. Okay, so these kind of things associated with this, but overall our understanding of human reproduction is only concerned with male and female. Okay, then at the end of the chapter we are going to talk about reproductive health, and in this section we are only going to focus on human reproductive health. Now how humans are different reproductive diseases or reproduction related diseases that are in our environment. At the same time, those diseases are very deadly. In some cases, some diseases are very deadly, and it is kind of our responsibility to make awareness of those health related issues that can be started from misunderstanding of this our reproductive health. So this chapter we will going to focus on those aspects also. So overall your unit going to cover starting from a basic introduction, following up to this plant reproduction, then human, then finally reproductive health, and this unit will be finished. So overall your understanding of, after understanding human anatomy, physiology and other stuff, we are going to end our human overall study of our organism by this chapter. Okay, so first of all, if someone asks you what is reproduction, reproduction basically in case of higher organisms it means a form of living behind yourself. Okay, what I am trying to say by that, this means nobody is going to live forever. Okay, so if you look into news, there are some people might be living up to age 120 years. Okay, those are kind of recorded in Guinness Book of World Record. Okay, because they live so long. They are 125 years of age people. At the same time, region wise and also geography wise, there are some other people who have more, they have more age as compared to some other countries. That means, for example, if you look into the average age of an Japanese people, those people lived for almost 82 years. Okay, so their average age kind of count to 82 years. But if you look into in India average age for an adult male is around 60 to 61. These are the average approximation. So you can see there is a huge gap between a Japanese citizen and an Indian citizen. Okay, so this gap is marked by different factors. For example, it can be geographical factors, it can be genetical factors also, it can be also the health sector, how they are performing for the people. At the same time, it can be such that our habits, how we are living our day-to-day life, that can also impact our longevity. Okay, that means how long we are going to live. These all are factors kind of interconnected. But if you see for an organism, it is always that the organism try to leave its mark behind. Okay, so we always try to leave our mark behind. So in future classes you will get to understand about human evolution. In those sections you will understand that humans are kind of evolved from different structures. Okay, different peoples or different human form like animals already existed in the past, and those evolution continuously shape human race. Okay, so you can see every organism in a way try to leave its mark. In case of a small animal, for example, let's say a cat for example try to leave its mark by giving birth to more kittens. Okay, so in a year a cat might give 15 to 20 kittens. Okay, these are their reproductive agenda that they want to complete. They want to leave behind those numbers of animals so that their population continue in future also. Okay, so these are the things. But in case of some organisms, their reproduction is itself an identity that they lived in the past and they are continue to do so. So first of all, in describing a process called growth, we can always say that reproduction becomes a vital process without which species cannot survive for long. So obviously we can say that nobody going to survive for long. Okay, there is no person in earth, in case of human, that lived almost up to 300 years. Nobody lived. Okay, there are some fairy tales may exist, but those are all falsehood. Okay, because as of now we know that people do not live for that much long time. Okay, so you can say here that reproduction is become a vital process without which species cannot survive for long. So these are the main criteria associated with it. So what is second sentence said here, that each individual leaves its progeny by asexual or sexual means. Asexual mode of reproduction enables the creation of new variants. So this sentence is probably not new for you, because we already talked about so much here that there are only two types of reproduction that exist. For example, in nature we saw two types of reproduction. For example, one is asexual. And how do you define asexual? Asexual defined by involvement of only one parent. That means no two parents come together to give rise to a new organism. In asexual reproduction, only one parent is responsible for giving birth to a new organism. So only one parent is involved. So what are the means to achieve this? There can be variety of ways to achieve this. Okay, we already talked about this. So in this chapter we are going to see this, but as of now just remember that asexual reproduction is involving only one parent. But there is another form of reproduction which is termed as sexual reproduction, right? See, this sexual word derived from the word involvement of sexual organs. Okay, if there are some sexual organs involved in production of new organism, then we can say two organisms come together or two parents come together to give rise to a new organism. So in this scenario, not only one parent, in this scenario two parents will come together. Okay, and there is a involvement of sexes. Okay, so these are the two things that are associated with reproduction. So if you read this section, you will understand that this section or this unit, already I talked about that this section is covered along along these chapters about all these things: reproduction in plants, reproduction in humans, and finally this is an add-on chapter which is reproductive health. So if you continue your study, then in your first section is given the name of a scientist from India. He is very popular in case of using the term called embryology. You need to underline some key points from here, because nowadays questions are asked from these sections also, because these are very critical part of the chapters, because this scientists give their whole life work to understand a particular topic. So there may be some questions also come from here, because this already given in your introduction section. Okay, so you have to focus on that. So his name is Panchanan Maheshwari. So Panchanan Maheshwari was born in Jaipur. Obviously these are the introduction section, you can read here. But what is the main part here is that he worked on embryological aspects. You should underline this point as I am showing here. He worked on embryological aspects and popularized the use of embryological characteristics in taxonomy. See, in class 11 we already talked about taxonomical study, right? So in taxonomy, we categorize organism into different taxa to help us to understand the living organisms or the diversity that exists in living organisms. But in this scenario, the word taxonomy includes many characters. Okay, it can include their physiological character, it can include their reproductive structures, it can include their cellular structures, all that stuff, right? But Panchanan Maheshwari, what he did, he popularized the concept of using of embryology as a characters of taxonomy. So he pushed this idea that you have to use embryological character as a marker to order something as taxonomically. Okay, so taxonomical order in taxonomical studies, embryological understanding is popularized by Panchanan Maheshwari. Then continue to this, he established, it is the important point, he established the Department of Botany University of Delhi as an important center for research in embryology and tissue culture. See, if you need to remember this point, that he worked around this time. Okay, he born in 1904, then he died in 1966. So India got independent in 1947. So you can understand that at the time our government are trying to focus on, developing our education system, also developing different branches of science. So at this time, these scientists contributed by different means of their researches. Okay, so he contributed by establishing the botany, department of botany in the University of Delhi. Okay, so there his contribution. Okay, again, one of the most important point you can highlight from here is this. He also emphasized on the need for initiations of work on artificial culture of immature embryos. See, you should underline this point because some questions might given there in MCQ form, where these questions will be asked that following which scientist worked on the artificial culture of immature embryos. Then there are 4 options will be given and you have to mark Panchanan Maheshwari. Okay, here is the point. Again, at the end you will see that our first NCERT books, which was started from around when the new education policy started for the first time in 1984, I guess. At that time, the whole education system kind of shift to a new direction. But before that, the whole NCERT textbook formulation comes under his supervision in 1964. So this is the important point regarding it. So obviously you guess the idea that he is one of the pioneer in this section, okay, study of botany as a whole, at the same time contributing to Indian botanical study. Okay, so you should mark all these points from this section. Now we are going to study about our chapter, which is reproduction in organisms. See, in reproduction in organism, what is the first thing that we have to see is that how reproduction is associated with lifespan. That means how long you are going to live. Reproduction is associated, how reproduction is associated with our lifespan. So you should underline this point, that the life period from birth to the natural death of an organism represent its lifespan. See, what is lifespan might ask in your exam, in your subjective question exam, where 1 marks may be given for this question. Okay, so lifespan is a period from birth, when you are born, to the natural death. So can we say lifespan in case of an unnatural death also? You can say that, but see, if we wanted to define this term lifespan in a very in biological context, then we have to consider natural born and at the same time natural death. So these two factors come together in case of defining something as a lifespan. Okay, lifespan word can be defined only by using these two natural marker. Okay, so you should underline this. Then if you read here, you will get the examples of different organisms that live for different period of time. For example, a mango tree can live for 30-40 years. Okay, so during this time it can give fruit many times, right? But initial those 6 to 7 years, I'm not talking about those hybrid plants. Okay, those plants now modified to give fruits in very short duration. Okay, but those plants which kind of our local varieties, okay, those plants take longer duration to get mature. After certain time they will start giving us fruits in the form of that mango. So those are the cases in case of an lifespan of an organism. So if you take the examples of a elephant lives for certain age, okay, until then it matures, it gives rise to until it matures, it is not capable to produce new organism. But when it's become adult, then it's become capable to produce new organism. But even after that, it only lives for few years. Okay, so it lives for more years after it becomes adult. Again, that is also limiting factor for that elephant. Okay, an elephant is not going to live for many years. Okay, so this are the example. So there are certain other organisms like birds, they live for short period of time. Then you can take the examples of a dog, which probably going to live for 5 to 10 years in some case more than 10 years. Okay, these are the examples. Then again, certain organisms, for example, a tortoise, it's going to live for more than 200 years. Okay, so see, you can see the lifespan of an organism is vary. Okay, from different organism live different for period of time. And in case of human, I already talked about, in certain countries people live for very long. Okay, for example, you can take the examples of Italian people. Because their health structure is very good, and then their health sector is very good. People live very healthy lifestyle, so they live for around 80-100 years. In case of Japanese people, they are very connected to the nature, and also their habits are very culturally oriented, and also they are very healthy people. So they live for around 90-100 years. But in case of countries like Somalia, India, Bangladesh or Pakistan, these people kind of go through a harsh environment. And at the same time, our health sector is not very up to the mark. So what happened that people natural living standard degraded with time. At the same time, our longevity also kind of get reduced. But you will get a contrasting idea that in case of our grandfathers or grandmothers, they live for very long. There is also a correlating factor with our living standard. Okay, as our living standard kind of changing at very rapid pace, and those are not very healthy too. So that's why our living, those are kind of reducing. But you can, contrastingly, you can say one thing, that our health sector is also kind of improving. As it's improving, our prenatal birth kind of increased in a way. People or those children who died under the age of 5, death percentage also get reduced because our health sector slowly started to improve. Okay, then also that premature death kind of reduced also. Okay, and people who are died from starvation and different kinds of diseases like cholera, jaundice, this type of disease also get reduced because of different measures taken by our government throughout this time period. That's why our population kind of increased also. But if we want to take a contrasting viewpoint between two geographical scenario, then you can definitely say that the lifespan of an Japanese people and an Indian people is always varies. But anyway, continue our study here. This is the first introduction where 2 points are given. That means we are going to talk about asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction as a whole in this section. Okay. So if you look into your next chapter here, you have to write the age. Okay. So it's your homework that you Google and you write the different age or different lifespan for these different organisms. For a fruit fly, cow, and in case of parrot, it's already given 140 years. Okay, so a parrot lives for around 140 years. Then, for example, a banana tree, a dog around 10 to 15 years. You should write about this elephant. Okay. Then butterfly around 1 to 2 weeks. These are the lifespan. Crocodile around 60 years. You should write this rice plant. A rice plant probably lives for around 4 to 6 months. Okay, this is the duration of time. Then in case of tortoise, it lived around 100 to 150 years. So these are the connected dots. Then you should see, in case of banyan tree, you will see a banyan tree, as it is a plant, it might live up to 500 to 600 years. Okay, and there are some plants that exist which live up to 1000 years. You should Google this. Okay, if you Google, then you will find some plants that lived around more than 1000 years. Okay, now if you continue into this section, so here is the first definition of reproduction. You should underline this point, that reproduction is defined as a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young one, that means offspring. See, in biology we have to focus on some keywords. So offspring is a keyword. You should highlight this and write this instead of giving rise to young ones, because it signifies the importance of the keyword in biology. Okay, you should remember this word offspring. Then similar to itself. Similar to itself means not synonymous. That means you are not similar to your father, but you are kind of different in your facial expression, your height, and your overall body growth and structures. But it means that you are overall connected to your previous generation. So this is reproduction as a whole. Okay, you should underline this point. If what is the definition of reproduction or what is reproduction, you should write only this. The reproduction is defined as a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young one. You should write in the bracket offspring, okay, similar to itself. So what is the contrasting fact here? That the offspring grow, mature, and in turn produce new offspring. Okay, so this is the overall cycle of life. That means an organism, first of all, it grows, then it matures. After it reaches a certain age, it becomes capable of reproduction, then it turn produce new offspring, and this cycle will repeat after that. So these are the key factors here. So there is a cycle of birth, growth, and death. Then if you focus on, then we are going to see that what are the types of reproduction that exist. First of all, there are only two types of reproduction. So when reproduction or offspring is produced by a single parent, I already talked about that reproduction is of two types. One is asexual. That means if only one parent is involved, then reproduction is involvement of one parent only. Then there is another word called without the involvement of gamete formation. Gamete means when male and female reproductive organs, they produce different kinds of reproductive structures which are responsible for giving rise to new organism. So those are termed as gamete. Okay. Then if there is only one parent, that means there is no fusion of gametes. It means asexual reproduction. But if there is a involvement of two parents, then it includes sexual reproduction. But here is a contrasting point. That means you have to use opposite sex. Same sex cannot produce new organism by means of sexual reproduction. Okay. So for sexual reproduction to happen, you need opposite sex and also two different gametes. Okay. So one is male gamete and another is female gamete. So this fusion of male and female gametes come only in case of different organism. The male gamete will be different, female gamete will be different. But in case of humans, for example, the male gamete is sperm and female gamete is ovum. Okay, we are going to study about this in detail in later section. But for now, let's talk about asexual reproduction. So here is a picture of an amoeba. So see, we already talked about this in many times in our previous standard. So if you see, in case of amoeba, this is the unicellular structures of an amoeba. That means an amoeba is an unicellular structure. Only cell is its whole identity. This cell is itself the identity of amoeba. Okay. So when the time of cellular division comes, the cell start to become enlarged, and this nucleus which is in the center start to get enlarged here. So its size kind of got increased. Okay. And later time this nucleus become 2 and the cell also get enlarged. At the same time the cellular materials also get doubled inside the cell, and finally this cell divides into two separate cells which are almost similar because they are connected to their old parent, and these are called as daughter cells. Also we can say this is the reproduction of amoeba. That means this is an amoeba and this is also an amoeba. So this is the reproduction in case of amoeba. And what are the few things we can say here? That means these offspring are likely to be genetically identical or different. There are two phenomena only can happen in case of asexual reproduction. First of all, these offspring are genetically similar because these organisms are directly the results of their old parent. Okay, so there is a 2 and these two are almost similar to their parent. But in case of this budding, in case of an yeast, In case of yeast, the outer growth happen here, then this cellular material again multiplied, then again at the end you will see there is a bud formation, and this bud will give rise to a completely new organism. So these are the key reproductive structures that we can see in case of asexual reproduction. And here is the figure, that is, the first point is budding in case of yeast and binary fission in case of amoeba. Why binary fission? Because it is the division of the cell into two halves. That is the word binary. Okay. So in this first section we talk about the basic introduction of the chapter, and now I want to conclude this section with the introduction of asexual reproduction. And we are already talked about the cell division in case of bacteria, binary fission in case of amoeba, and budding in case of an yeast.